providing me with this opportunity. Colleagues and friends, good afternoon. Today I would like to introduce you to how gender is relevant to HIV. And by the end of this session, I hope that you feel very familiar to the topic and can also explain to other people. My presentation is composed in 3 parts. First, I will go through the context of the HIV epidemic, and then I will move on to explain about the linkage between gender and HIV, and that will lead to how we can transform the HIV response so that it will meet the gender needs. And the presentation will take only 7 minutes, very brief and concise. And please save your comments and questions to the end of the presentations. You will have 3 minutes for Q&A. So let's begin. In our Asia and the Pacific region, there are nearly 5 million people living with HIV. And you can see here that in every hour, 40 persons are infected by HIV. And among the 5 million people, 1/3 of them are women. If you look at the Vietnamese context, there are around 250,000 people living with HIV, of which 66,000 are women. And I would like to draw your attention to this red line. This is the new HIV infections. And in recent years, it has become steady or is in slightly in reducing and is around 14,000. However, if you look at the ratio between men and women of these cases, you can see that the red graph, which represent women, female cases, is on steady increase. So why is this happening? The key to answer this question is to consider why and how gender matters to HIV. Firstly, harmful gender norms, such as norms of masculinity, can encourage high-risk sexual behavior by men and make their partner more vulnerable to HIV transmission. Also, norms of femininity can prevent women, especially young women, from accessing HIV information and services. Also, this links to Feng's presentation about gender-based violence. And in general, women living with HIV are more likely to report history of intimate partner violence. Intimate partner violence meaning violence from your husband or your partner, your boyfriend and girlfriends. Gender-based violence, including the threat or fear of violence, makes women and girls, men who have sex with men, and transgender people more vulnerable to HIV. And women from the key populations are particularly more likely to experience violence. When we say key populations, it means people who inject drugs, and men who have sex with men, and female sex workers in Vietnamese case. Also, gender inequality has an impact because lack of education and economic security limits decision-making power, mobility, and access to information and services. And also, it would affect women's health-seeking behavior and by especially stigma and discrimination towards women living with HIV. To summarize, gender inequalities and gender-based violence, as well as harmful gender norms, promote unsafe sex and reduce access to HIV and sexual and reproductive health services for women, also men and transgender people. So what can we do to overcome these hurdles? One answer could be that to conduct gender assessment. Gender assessment enables to review HIV epidemic context and response from a gender perspective. So what we do is to first collect data on the epidemic, socio-cultural, economic, judicial, political context. And then we would analyze it against the HIV response to identify gaps and challenges. And then we can identify the key gender-based interventions which would have the highest impact on the HIV epidemic. So if you look at the current HIV response in Vietnam, mainly the epidemic is concentrated on the key populations, as I explained. So the government's response is also concentrated on these three key populations. Since 2013, last year, or 2 years ago, the government started to collect sex disaggregated data. However, they're not analyzing the data, or there's no linkage made between gender-based violence. So my recommendation is for UN Women to support the Vietnam administration of AIDS control under the Ministry of Health to enhance their HIV services to be sensitive and responsive to sexual and reproductive health and gender needs and rights of women, men, transgender persons in all their diversity through conducting gender assessment. In conclusion, so we learned that new infections in Vietnam, if you look at women, it's unsteadily increase, and gender have impact on how women can protect themselves from HIV transmission or to access necessary services. And finally, UN Women can help VAAC to conduct gender assessment to strengthen their HIV response. Thank you. So if you have any questions or comments, please.
Any questions, ladies and gentlemen? Any questions? Come on, yes, please.
Thank you for the presentation. I saw that some of the data that you have is quite old, quite outdated. It's like it's since 2011. So do you have any new data for like in the last 3 years regarding the new infection by women?
So I took this out from last year's Vietnam's national report, and I agree with you that the graph was not updated, but the information provided by the same report covered until 2013, and then the trend was still the same, and it's women's infection with new cases or even further increase. Thank you for your question. Ms. Shoko.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation, and I think it shows that cases of HIV among female increasing is very much a concern for our organization. Could you tell us a little bit about what the government's response is by seeing this data? Are they aware that this is an issue and there is something that is needed to be done?
Thank you for raising an important point. I actually heard from our UNAIDS colleagues that VAAC, the Vietnam Authority on AIDS Control, they are aware of this issue, and it's actually their report that puts this graph and points out to this phenomenon. And they are looking for support to further enhance their HIV response, which is more sensitive and responsive to gender needs. But they have not been able to go further with their action yet.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms Leika.